The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome. Welcome to the show. It's Saturday evening. Everyone's having a fantastic weekend so far. It's busy weekend. This I don't know why. Super busy. Everything's been busy. I think I told you I've bought a new place in Puerto Rico, so that kind of consumed most of last week, getting everything wrapped up, getting the mortgage done, getting signing up everything. So did all of that yesterday. I am now an owner of real estate of a condominium overlooking the Atlantic Ocean in San Juan, Puerto Rico. So I am here. I'm here for a few years, so for the next 10 years or so. So yeah, that has been keeping me busy. And now we got to renovate the new place. We got to get all set up. We got to get furniture. It never ends, but hopefully, starting in June, we will be doing the show from a new studio in the new condo in Puerto Rico. If you would like to help support the building of that studio, green screen, new camera, acoustic paneling on the walls and on the ceiling to make sure we have the best sound quality possible, then it's going to cost several thousands of dollars. So any support towards that is appreciated. You can do that on, of course, on PayPal.com/YaronBrookShow, or you can do it in all the other ways in which you can support the show, all the other platforms in which you can support the show. So we will do that. Tomorrow, the show will be at 12 o'clock Eastern time. So now I have to get used to the fact that the rest of the world is shifting clocks while Puerto Rico is staying put. So we are no longer going to be an hour forward from East Coast time. We will now be on East Coast time. So 12 o'clock tomorrow, we'll be doing a show so early. And let's see, what other announcements do we have? I don't think we have any. I think that's probably it. All right, so today we're going to talk about central planning. We're going to talk about central planning in the context of what's going on in the world today. We're going to talk about central planning in the context of the COVID and post-COVID and emergencies and the rise of nationalism in America, because I think that's very relevant. We're going to talk about central planning in the context of the Federal Reserve, and that is going to be interesting. And we're going to talk about whether, as Daniel says, we are doomed. We're going to talk about that as well. There's a, I don't think we're doomed. You're going to get a little bit of, my ongoing attempt to infuse you guys with optimism and energy to fight for a future rather than the pessimism of we are doomed, there's nothing we can do about it. Might as well just lay down and pretend we're dead. No, you got to live. All right, we've got Eddie. Eddie is tuning in from Romania. We don't get a lot of listeners from Romania. That is great. Thank you, Eddie, and I won't try to pronounce your family name. Thank you for joining us. So, all right, Brian gave 1,000th of my home studio fund. Really appreciate that. That'll go towards some of the paint we need to do the paint job on the green screen. So I think a gallon of paint is like $100. So the $5 will go towards that. Daniel says listening to your podcast is like doing white math, Yaron. I still don't get it. Instead of raising a hand for teacher, the commercial breaks my intense concentration. All right, so this is supposed to be a criticism of the commercials on YouTube. And I get that, and there's a way around that. I mean, there are a number of ways around that, but the obvious way around that for you guys is to just buy a pro thing on YouTube. You can buy yourselves out of commercials. You can. I don't see commercials on YouTube because I subscribe to YouTube something. I don't know what it is. And you can subscribe to that. I don't think it's that expensive, and therefore you won't get commercials. The alternative, of course, to that is I am willing to offer a buyout of all the commercials. So what I'm willing to do is for the right amount of money, I am willing to commit to turning off all commercials on all videos in the future. So we just need to come up with the right amount, right? Let's see. All right. So we can do this. For I'm doing the math in my head. So give me a minute, and then we'll get back to central planning, but or start on central planning. But let's see. Yeah, for $500 of new contributions, $500 of new contributions, you can make a $500, or we could do 5 100s. You can get 5 people to contribute to this. But for $500 of new contributions a month, I will turn off all the advertising, the commercials. I think that's about what I get on YouTube from the commercials. So $500, if somebody wants to give me $500, I'll turn off all advertising for a month, at least on new videos, because it's too much of a hassle to go back and turn off advertising for all the old ones. But I'll do it for all the new videos. What I do think, Ryan, thank you for the 0.99th of 1,000 for the studio. I really appreciate it. But I will say this about YouTube advertising, that I was pretty sure that the latest videos on like racist math and the anti-racist racism, all of that stuff, I was sure all of that would not be commercialized. That Amazon would refuse to put advertising on that because it was so sensitive, and so inflammatory. And after all, it's worthy of being canceled, I guess. And the algorithm, the YouTube algorithm, said, "Oh no, we can't put commercials on these videos." And then I challenged it and I asked for a review, and they approved them all. So pretty much all of my videos the last few months have had advertising. Ryan says he doesn't know what commercials I'm talking about because he doesn't see any. You probably have like a YouTube Pro, YouTube Extra, YouTube whatever, where you don't get to see commercials. All right? Oh my God. Daniel says he has a 250 bottle of I figured this out last time, of ivermectin. How much should he drink to save himself from COVID? I have to treat my cows for biannual parasite control. I think it's going to be more useful for your cows than for you. Just because I take it from your picture, you're pretty young, I don't think you need any additional treatment for COVID. Just, you'll do fine. You'll do fine. Oh, God. All right, so I've offered you a way to buy yourself into commercial freedom, into no commercials anymore. Up to you at this point. All right, let's see. So I was looking for a topic for today, and as you know, I have my favorite kind of economists and others that I go to try to see what they're writing about, what they're interested in, and what's going on. And I came across a couple of posts that I thought were interesting and I think really fit nicely under this Rubicon of central planning. The first is from my go-to, Economist podcast, and that is, of course, the Grumpy Economist. That is John Cochrane, whose economics blog, is one of the best and most interesting, and has a lot of really, really cool content on it. So I encourage you to read it. But where I pick up a lot of really good stuff on economics, and there he has a whole article about inflation expectations and about the Fed and the Fed policy, and is the Fed policy today like it was in the 60s and 70s, and will it lead to the same result, which is inflation, or could it be worse, or maybe it won't happen this time, and all of that. And it struck me that I could get into the technical aspects of inflation, but it's technical, and I don't have like a Peter Schiff easy, digestible answer for you. Yes, there's going to be hyperinflation by gold. That's just not me. So, rather than do that, I thought I'd rather talk about the insanity of what the Fed is doing, not from the perspective of maybe to cause inflation, from the perspective of this is central planning on steroids, central planning of the most important price in the economy, and they don't know what they're doing. And I'll give you some evidence of the fact that they don't know what they are doing. And then I bounced over to one of my new favorites. This is Scott, and I'm going to butcher his name, so I apologize, Scott. Scott actually listened to a show I did on one of his articles, and he tweeted about it, so he might listen. But well, one of these days I'll meet Scott and I'll ask him how to pronounce the name. Maybe I've already met him. I don't know, but I'll Lynn Siocome, Lincicome, Lincicome. I encourage you. He's got a Substack. On economics. It's called Capitalism with an O. And it's very good. It is very good. It's not technical. It's not written for economists. It's written for the layman. And I have yet to read anything I disagree with, although sometimes he hedges himself a little bit, where I would be going all out. But he's writing for a different audience, so I understand why he's doing it. But basically, I haven't disagreed with anything. Real, straightforward, a good writer, and just presents a case for free markets in an interesting way, using what I think are original concretes and original examples to make his points. So really, I'm impressed. I like it. And so he did something on basically this executive order that Biden has signed about, I don't know, a week or two ago, I think 2 weeks ago. Basically, it didn't do anything other than instruct a review, that the government should hold a review of the global supply chains, particularly medical goods and semiconductors, with the idea, particularly with the context of COVID, with the idea of bringing the supply chains back to America. So basically, this is Biden being Trump, but really Trump was Biden, because Trump was a leftist, and now Biden is mimicking Trump because Trump was always on the left when it comes to economic policy, like this. So this is Biden continuing kind of the economic nationalist policies of Trump, whereas we're supposed to bring everything onshore. Oh, Martial, is that right? Martial Haley says, I'm in France, so I can finally show my support on Super Chat. That's great. Thank you. Don't stop what you're doing. I appreciate it. I've subscribed to Capitalism. Excellent. I mean, the more people subscribe to a place like Capitalism and support the writers, even though I know it comes out of what you could be supporting me, but supporting these writers, the more voices we have, rational voices, pro-free market voices, unapologetic voices for free market, voices that were not captured by Trump, conservative nationalism and a nationalist economic agenda. The more voices like that there are, the greater the chance there is to change the world. So I am trying to subscribe to as many of these Substacks, read as many of the blogs, support as many of the people out there who might not agree with me philosophically, but are fighting the case in their area of expertise, their case for liberty, for freedom, for free markets, for capitalism. And Scott is certainly doing that. And of course, John Cochrane is really doing that. The difference is John Cochrane's posts are far more technical. He's far more an academic economist, far more technical, although much of what he writes is very readable, particularly what he writes about COVID. But much of what he writes is very readable, but a lot of it is technical. Some of it assumes some economic knowledge. But I still encourage you to basically subscribe, follow, do whatever you need to do with both of those guys, because they're truly excellent. So I encourage that. Okay, so let's start with just a general discussion of central planning, and maybe some of my critique of some of the libertarian discussions about central planning or libertarian arguments against central planning, particularly Hayek. And then I want to use both what Scott has written and what John Cochrane has written to maybe give you some examples of what this means. But what is the essential idea behind central planning is that in the broader sense, you can do better than markets. Markets haphazard. Markets depend on people. They would argue people's whims, people's changing values, people's changing opinion. You can see that with the stock market going up and down. Markets, the argument is, can't and don't always think about what's long term, what's good for somebody in the long term. Markets are motivated, are driven by individuals' pursuit of self-interest, individuals' pursuit of profit. That indeed markets are, and most people today won't deny the benefits of markets. Markets do produce the goods, but the argument is today we can do better, and in certain realms, the argument is markets fail. Markets don't produce the results. Markets create volatility. They create uncertainty. They create inequality. They don't treat everybody the same, so egalitarians hate markets. And they don't necessarily produce the outcome that economists and philosophers and ethicists would consider optimal, ideal, socially the best, whatever the hell that means. And therefore, the solution to all this is, well, and again, almost nobody today rejects markets. I mean, even the socialists that I debate with say, oh, no, we like markets. We just want X, Y, Z, which basically undermines and destroys markets. But everybody pretends to like markets because they get a sense that there's something good about it. But they say what we need is some guidance. What we need are institutions that make sure that the markets don't fail. What we need are institutions that better project long term. What we need are institutions that in areas where we supposedly, quote, know that markets will not be successful, well, we supposedly know that markets will fail, we need institutions that will guide prices or will guide production in those areas. So, for example, there's almost uniform acceptance of the fact, almost uniformly in the economics profession. It's 1 in 100, maybe 1 in 1,000 who disagree with this, is the idea that money is too important. Money is too risky to leave to markets, and that when markets deal with money, it creates depressions, it creates volatility, it creates uncertainty, it creates real problems and real challenges. And therefore we must centralize and monopolize the production of money. Centralize and monopolize interest rates, the determination of interest rates. Although there are more economists that would question that than would question the issue of money. And that this, for example, is an area where we need central planning. And you see that with the whole discussion about the Fed. A discussion about what the Fed should do and how the Fed should behave. A discussion, in my view, that is completely and utterly futile. Because even if there was a right thing for the Fed to do, and I don't think there is such a thing, they can't do it because as a political institution, there are too many pressure groups and too many forces at work to move them away from that. But of course, there isn't one real, true way of doing it because what they're being asked to do is impossible. So the idea is, for example, money is way too important to leave to markets. We need to centralize it. We need to give it to a bunch of real experts, people who actually know what they're doing, and not leave it to the machinations of what Hayek called, spontaneous order. And of course, we see that, so that's money. But we see that, for example, with Trump, right? Steel. Steel is too important to leave to the marketplace. It's too important to leave to the profit motive. It's too important to let CEOs of businesses and consumers and interactions, and markets in other words, determine, for example, where steel will be produced. Steel has so-called, quote, a national interest. So it's our responsibility to put tariffs and to subsidize and to control and to manipulate in order to make sure that steel is produced where the central planner believes it should be. And that central planner might be Trump 1 year, and it's going to be Biden another year. Lately, because of COVID, those inclined towards central planning basically have come to the conclusion that markets have failed. They have failed because we are so reliant on China for our pharmaceuticals. Why have pharmaceuticals, put so much production capacity in China? They've left the United States incapable of producing its own medicines. And we must do something about it. And this is what's motivating Biden right now. Biden's thing is pharmaceuticals and of course, semiconductors. The United States used to produce most of the world's semiconductors. Now it produces only about, I think, 12% of the world's semiconductors. But that's terrible because now there's a shortage of semiconductors and we have to import them, and that can't be right. So we need to centrally plan the expansion of semiconductor manufacturing in the United States. And again, that's what Biden is getting at with his investigation of the supply chains. And of course, we saw that with PP&E. Why do we have to import all the PP&E? Why can't we manufacture it in the U.S.? And with all this stuff, masks and gloves and oxygen and everything. Right? COVID was a great opportunity for the economic nationalists to get on the in the bully pulpit and make a big deal out of it. And they had the ideal president for that, Trump, and now they've got the Second most ideal president for that, Biden, who love to intervene and who love to be able to dictate to markets what they should and shouldn't be doing, where they should and shouldn't produce, how much they should, at what prices they should. Right. So, what's the problem with this? I mean, we got some really smart people. You know, maybe economists, maybe pick some of the Nobel Prize winners, put them in charge of some economic area, like, I don't know, the production of money. And don't you think they would do a better job than the markets? I mean, they think it through, they figure it out. Today, think about today. We have supercomputers. Certainly, the government can afford, using our money, of course, to buy supercomputers and to deploy supercomputers. They're much bigger than any particular industry player. And even then, there would be competition. Couldn't we just make this more efficient if we had super smart people connected with massive computers running the best artificial intelligence in the world? They would beat the market. No? Why not? What is it about a marketplace that makes it impossible for a central planner to actually do his job? Is it complexity, which is to a large extent Hayek's argument? Too many variables, too much data that changes too often. Now, that is all true. That is all true. One of the beauty of the marketplace is you have price signals, you have demand and supply signals that are constantly being transmitted through a variety of different channels, and that the market integrates, and that a single central planner would not be able to track and not be able to keep up with. But here's the question. Could a supercomputer with really sophisticated artificial intelligence, could they keep track of all of that? Could they mimic all of that? Could they model all of that? Could they simulate all of that? And give us a superior distribution of knowledge? Right? And if not, why not? If it's just a matter of complexity, aren't we getting better and better at complexity theory, at big computers, at better algorithms, at better AI to deal exactly with this kind of complexity? If computers can, and we think they can in the future, perform surgery, if they can diagnose cancer from an MRI, why can't computers, guided by, just like in medicine, they're guided by doctors, guided by economists, why can't they centrally plan? Why can't they, for example, set the price of money, set interest rates, set the level of the amount of money to be printed? What is it about central planning that makes it an impossibility? Because it would seem that if just the complexity, we can overcome complexity with enough firepower, with enough computing power. So what is the real issue? I don't think it's complexity. I mean, complexity certainly is an issue, but complexity is a manifestation of something completely different. Complexity in markets is a manifestation of individual values. Individual values that only the individual knows. And he provides, if you will, the information about his values, about what he cares about, how much he cares about something, what he's willing to do, what he's not willing to do. He reflects those individual values. He manifests those individual values in his work, in his purchasing, in his actions in the marketplace, in his voluntary, free actions in the marketplace. He might say, I don't want a Ferrari. I'm now willing to pay $150,000, that's a cheap Ferrari, for a cheap Ferrari. For me, to get from point A to point B, I'm much more interested in a $20,000 Toyota. That's my values. Now, it doesn't mean everybody has the same values. Some people might have the money and might have the inclination to invest more into a car. So somebody else might buy the Ferrari at $150,000. Frank, who's obviously owned a Ferrari at some point, is telling us that the oil change in a Ferrari is $1,000. Yeah. So when we enter into the marketplace, both as entrepreneurs, as workers, as managers, with the salary we take, and then as consumers, as producers, whatever actions we take that is related to the economic marketplace, including things we choose not to buy, that impacts prices. It impacts supply and demand. It's not something a central planet can predict, because it's something that's based on my values, my assessment of trade-offs, my preferences as an individual. Preferences that cannot be modeled mathematically. My value hierarchy cannot be modeled mathematically, even if I could articulate it fully to a mathematician. So what a central planner is trying to do is assess the number of people who prefer Fiats. Fiats, I don't know if Fiats came into it. I thought it was Toyotas. Anyway, Toyotas. The number of people who want Ferraris. Of course, he might decide that nobody should want a Ferrari. Right? Wow, Frank has owned a portion of Maserati secondhand. All right, Frank, now my expectations of your Super Chat contributions have gone up significantly. Now that I know you've owned a portion of Maserati. Maserati is the car I would like to own. Not going to happen anytime soon. But Maserati is a car I would love to own. It's a beautiful car, and it drives beautifully. But yes, anybody can own afford a portion of Maserati should be able to afford a robust Super Chat contribution, don't you think? All right, so what can be modeled, not because you don't have the information, because the information is not available in a form that can be translated into decision-making by a third party. Because you cannot aggregate the values of people. You don't know what those values are. And again, a central planner would design what? What was that car they built in the Soviet Union? A Dassault or something? I mean, they would decide one car, one simple car for everybody. Because it may be, a fancy car for the members of the Communist Party. But why do you need more than a Toyota, let's make it a Toyota Prius, to get from point A to point B? Right? To a central planner, to a computer, to a machine, to somebody who's trying to optimize an economy. What do you need more than a Yugo? Yugo was, I can't remember where they built the Yugos. Maybe it was the Czech Republic or Czechoslovakia at the time. There was a Skoda. Yes, they had a few cars. Yugos, Skodas, all worthless. The Trabant, that's right, they had a Trabant. So they had a few cars, all worthless. But they all looked the same. They were all dull. I want red. How much do I value red? How much am I willing to pay extra for red? You see, the whole perspective of central planning is anti-individual values, anti-individualism, anti the individual pursuing his happiness, anti the individual using his mind to pursue his values. Right? Central planning assumes we should all have the same values, or similar values, or about the same. And if I've got a really smart AI computer, then maybe I can have some variations, maybe based on income, maybe based on other characteristics. But the richness of options, the richness of possibilities, the richness of values that are a modern economy, a thriving economy, a developing, a growing economy, and a fun economy, that is not possible by a central planner. It destroys those kind of options when central planning is attempted. They just don't know what you want. They don't know what you value. They don't know what you would pay for and how much you would pay for it. The beauty of markets is not some abstract economic idea. The beauty of markets is that they allow individuals to express their own values, individuals to pursue their freedom, their values, and express that in their economic choices. You don't want a red Maserati? That's fine. Here's a blue Toyota or a green Ferrari or whatever. There's in my buildings, funny story. In my building in Puerto Rico, the building I just bought a condo at, actually bought the penthouse in. On the ground floor, there are shops. I mean, right now it's empty because they've all gone bust, but there are shops. And there's one, the only one that's still running is basically a shop that's been converted into a display room for really amazing automobiles. So every time I walk by and every time I look out of my balcony, out the window down, the guy takes all his cars and he puts them out on display. And he's got Ferraris and Maseratis and Lamborghinis. And he's got a McLaren. He's got a McLaren, a gorgeous gray McLaren. Oh, it is so beautiful. It's so beautiful. I mean, I would never buy one and I would never drive one. I certainly would never buy one in Puerto Rico because there's no way to drive it. But it's just a gorgeous automobile. So I just enjoy looking. You can still look at beautiful cars. I think that's still politically correct. You don't get into trouble. They're not going to come out and cancel you for looking at beautiful cars. He has Porsches. He has he had an Aston Martin, one of my favorites. He had an Aston Martin, so that's fun. Yes, somebody says, I'm sure you have a beautiful view you're on. You have no idea. I have an amazing, wonderful view. I always wanted to live. My dream was to live on a cliff above the ocean, right? I don't quite live on a cliff. I live in a condo building, but basically above the ocean. It's just ocean. I'm, in terms of feet, I'm 10 feet from the, 20 feet from the ocean on the ground level. From kind of the lagoon that spills into the ocean, and you get a view of both the lagoon and the ocean. When I have a green screen, I'll project my view on the green screen, and you'll be able to see it. So I'll do that. That'll be fun. So the beauty of the marketplace is that you get this variety because you get individuals making individual choices based on individual values. Now, sometimes what individuals choose and what individual values boggles the mind. But it's their life, their values, their money, Their choices, not yours. And you see, that a central planner cannot comprehend. That goes against everything that a central planner believes in. Now, note that that is true at the level of consumption goods, but that is also true at the level of production. The choice of whether to manufacture steel in the United States or to import it from other countries, the choice of whether to build an automobile in Detroit or in Kentucky or in Mexico, those choices are based on individual values of the producers, the information and knowledge they have that's very specialized, focused on the thing that they are doing, but also on the value choices of consumers that are determining what they will buy, what they won't buy, at what price point will they buy, at what price point won't they buy, what features do they want, what features don't they want, and as a consequence, where I should produce. When a government bureaucrat steps in and says, no, you have to produce here or not there, or wherever it happens to be, he's messing up with the entire supply chain of pricing information that is flowing in, distorting and perverting all of that. And at the end of the day, people lose their jobs. Consumers don't get exactly what they want, or some consumers get to what they want, but others don't because they don't get it at the price point they want. And the entire everything, the entire shape of production, the entire economy is distorted and perverted. And that's what, central planners don't care. They don't care. They always give, broad, statist excuses. National security. Yeah, right. How many times is national security an actual, legitimate reason to undermine our freedom, to distort supply chains, to distort economic decisions made by the marketplace? It's almost never. It's almost always used as an excuse, nothing else. And you can see this in this executive order by Biden. If you look at pharmaceuticals and you look at semiconductors, the fact is that the United States has no real pharmaceutical problem. And you can see that. The best example of that is our ability to produce hundreds of millions of vaccines, almost at the drop of a hat. Stunning how quickly American companies like Pfizer, like Merck, who has just signed a deal with Johnson & Johnson to produce Johnson & Johnson's vaccine. Because, why? Why can they do that? Because they have massive productive capacity in the United States. The fact is that we got the medicines we needed. Yeah, when a pandemic like COVID happens and it shocks the system and suddenly things change and people have to reorient production, it is stunning how quickly we got ventilators. And the challenge is that we got too many ventilators. You know why we got too many ventilators? Because the government got involved. And the government started buying massive quantities of ventilators. And by the time doctors had decided they actually didn't need that many ventilators because they figured out how to treat COVID and that ventilators were probably not what was needed, by that point in time, the government couldn't withdraw all those orders of ventilators because governments are not capable of getting those kind of signals fast enough. So we landed up having massive excesses of ventilators, giving them away to countries that didn't want them. If you think about the extent of the shock of COVID to the economic system, it's amazing how quickly we got masks and other PPE equipment. Yes, there was a shortage initially, but you'd expect a shortage when you get a shock to the economic system. And yes, you could argue that some entities like hospitals, doctors' offices, but primarily hospitals, should have bigger stockpiles. And I'm sure they would if they weren't so damn regulated. And if the government didn't say, don't worry about it, we'll do the stockpiles. I mean, as I've told you over and over and over again over the last 6 years, I think, the United States has a robust manufacturing sector, a healthy manufacturing sector, a manufacturing sector that is bigger now than it's ever been in terms of the amount it actually produces. Yes, it produces it with a lot less people. That's good, not bad. That's a sign of increased productivity. In spite of the political tensions with China, supply chains, even those reliant on China, actually worked, actually provided the goods. The United States is home to 500 pharmaceutical manufacturing facilities. It's got one of the highest concentrations in the world of pharmaceutical manufacturing facilities, some of them here in Puerto Rico. The biggest risk to supply chains for semiconductors, for medicine, for steel, for any of these things is political, not economics. And of course, who realizes after a shock like COVID, when they've got vulnerabilities in their supply chains, who do you think would adapt, change, once they came to that realization and would have the direct information to realize their vulnerability? Well, it would be the companies themselves. And this is why Apple, who is probably overly reliant on China, but overly reliant not because of an economic risk, but purely for political risk, because you never know what American politicians or Chinese politicians will do, how they will use leverage of Apple one way or the other to hurt one another. So there's no economic issue of having so much manufacturing in China. It's a political issue. And maybe you could argue a moral issue, but it's not economic. So Apple realizes that. So it's building massive facilities in India. And my guess is that it will build other facilities all over, in other places in the world. Because it needs to do what businesses do, which is diversify their capacities. Protect themselves from risk. Again, particularly political risk. I mean, one of the things that is truly amazing coming out of COVID, which I don't think anybody really appreciates, is how well we've done. Our politicians have screwed everything up. Everything from day one has been messed up. From not taking it seriously to not doing what the government should do, as we said, test, trace, isolate, to screwing up the testing, screwing up, delaying vaccines, expediting them, but then delaying them at the same time, locking us all down, shutting down businesses. Government is, every direction has screwed this up. And yet, we're doing okay. The world hasn't ended. There is 6 point something% unemployment. That's too high, but it's not Great Depression high. If you look at the numbers coming out of the survey of producers of actually manufacturing is right now very robust. it's truly amazing how well the U.S. economy has done, how well global trade has done. Exports coming out of China, Taiwan, and the rest of Asia are booming right now. There's literally a shortage of containers in Asia. They don't have enough containers in Asia to ship everything that's being demanded. The U.S. economy, and even more shockingly, the European economy, are surviving. Now, there's going to be a long-term pain, there's going to be a long-term cost because of the way government has dealt with all this. But we're doing okay, which is shocking. The central planners, no. We need to improve the supply chains. We need to give everybody a check. We need to subsidize businesses. We need to save the world. Remember Trump? The Trump administration gave Eastman Kodak. You remember? Anybody remember Eastman Kodak? You have to be like older to know what Kodak was. Kodak was like a giant. One of the great stories of American entrepreneurs. One of the great American businesses. I mean, truly one of the great. In Rochester, New York, a great company. Kodak for a while was a great company. Thank you, Ragnar of the Desert. Really appreciate that. And Kodak used to make film. Film. Remember film? Film, put in cameras, take pictures, develop. They used to develop the film. They used to produce the film, film for movies, film for individuals. They used to be the film company. They were huge, massive, and incredibly successful. And they missed the digital revolution. They missed digital cameras. They missed the whole trend. And basically went out of business. They survive here and there. They tried with some digital cameras, not very well. They still do some film because there is some film out there that people use. But basically, it's a dead company. Well, the Trump administration tried to resurrect them with a $765 million loan that was offered to them so that they would turn into a pharmaceutical company. Because we had a pharmaceutical problem, and the central planners knew it, and the central planners knew how to solve the problem by turning Kodak, a chemicals company, I guess, chemicals, but focused on film, into a pharmaceutical company. That's kind of Trump's Solyndra. Solyndra was Obama's attempt to subsidize solar panels, another form of massive central planning. Great. Thanks, Travis. Appreciate it. All of this, all of these excuses, the national security issue, the reliance on China issue, all of them are overblown. All of them are excuses for the government to play central planner, for the government to play producer, for the government to pick winners and losers, for the government to go in there and try to control business, manufacturing, supply chains. So, no. There's absolutely no reason a central plan. It's impossible to do, and it's fundamentally immoral. And it's fundamentally immoral because it intervenes in the voluntary, free choices of individuals. It tells us, no, we don't accept your value judgments. We're going to replace them with our value judgments because we're more important, because we're smarter, because we're philosopher kings and we know what's best. Thank you, Emmanuel. You don't get to make choices about consumption, about production, about prices, about materials, about where to buy what. We get to decide. We'll put on. We don't want you to buy from China. We want you to buy from this place or that place. So we want something to be produced wherever. Daniel is still hoping for an episode from the beach patio. I've told you it's going to have to depend on Wi-Fi, which is never a good idea for these shows. But we'll do something. We'll figure out something. We'll give him that beach perspective when we move into the new place. So even in times of emergency, maybe in particularly in times of emergency, don't fall for the central planners' excuses, justifications, rationalizations. Freedom works. Freedom works. I even believe that in time of war, there's no reason for the government to take control of the economy like they did in World War II, like they did in World War I, and pretended that it was a big success. Well, we don't know what they could have done if they'd left it all to private enterprise. So beware of the nationalists. Beware of emergencies. Beware of crises that they don't want to let go to waste. Beware, beware, beware. Now, quickly, I want to say something about this article about the Federal Reserve because it's related. So John Cochrane talks about the fact that, Fed governors are saying today, look, we don't think inflation is going to be that bad. We think a little bit of inflation is actually good. We don't know exactly how much inflation is good, but we think some inflation is good. We want inflation to be higher. And if inflation jumps up to higher rates than what we think is healthy, we have the tools to cut inflation back. Our main goal is not monetary stability. Our main goal is unemployment. We've got to get rid of unemployment. We've got to increase, decrease, slack in the economy. Slack is productive assets not being used, so we got to decrease unproductive slack in the economy. They're giving all these excuses. Now, as John says, this is very reminiscent of what the Federal Reserve was saying in the 1960s and early 1970s, which ultimately led to stagflation in the later part of the 70s. And they're completely confident in this. And yet they have no clue. I mean, a good example of the fact that they have no clue is the fact that for over 10 years now, the Federal Reserve has had an inflation target of 2%. They want inflation to be 2%. And they've done QE1 and QE2 and QE3 and QE whatever to try to get us to an inflation of 2%. And yet we never got 2% inflation. Inflation, as measured by the Fed, has always been below 2%. And no matter what they did and no matter what they tried, they hadn't been able to get inflation of over 2%. Indeed, Japan, for years and years and years, has said, oh, we need more inflation. We need more inflation. We get deflation. It's not good. We need more inflation. And they kept printing money and doing all kinds of things with the idea that they would get more inflation. Did they succeed? No. Now, they might succeed this time, but then they tell us with absolute confidence, the confidence of a central planner, that they have the tools to defeat inflation if it goes up a lot. They couldn't get us inflation when they wanted it. Why do you think they'd be able to get rid of it? Why do you think they'd have the political will, even if they knew how to get rid of it, of getting rid of it? Because in 1982, when we got rid of inflation, the result was a year-long, very deep recession. Anybody willing to do that if we suddenly get a spike in inflation? Central planners always pretend that they know what they're doing, express immense confidence. And yet money is super difficult. It's difficult to understand. It's difficult to understand how it exactly filters through the economy. how it impacts prices, how it impacts economic activity, how it impacts investment. In particular, when the Fed can do so many different things, pull so many different levers. For example, bailing out so many different businesses. So they don't know what they're doing. Not really, not fully. And again, what is it doing to you? Well, it's telling you you shouldn't save even if you have a preference for saving, because they keep interest rates low. They're telling you you should be in the stock market because look at the stock market go, which is partially fueled by what the Fed is doing. It tells you that since there's no interest rates are basically zero, investments in something over 20 years should be calculated in a similar manner in terms of its viability than a 5-year investment. So time, which is a really, really, really important parameter in economic planning and business assessment and investment, is irrelevant because remember, interest is the price of time. Interest is the price of time. It tells you time doesn't matter. That a 20-year investment is the same as 5. It should be discounted at the same interest rate. They're distorting the economy in ways that they have no idea. Now, what would happen in a free market? In a free market, interest rates would be determined by what? By people's desire to save and people's demand for funds in order for investment. So it's supply and demand for money would determine the price of interest rate, that particular interest rate. And then interest rates over time, that is the 1-year interest rate versus 20-year interest rate, would be determined by individual people's time preference. People who have no problem waiting 20 years for a project with time would take a different interest rate over 20 years than somebody who was very worried about what was going to happen over the next 20 years and valued money coming back to him sooner rather than later. The whole way in which people would look at their value choices would be different. Their incentives would be different. So the Fed is doing to money, to interest rates, to saving, investment, and productive decisions, particularly long-term ones, the same kind of damage that tariffs and price controls and trying to control the supply chain does when the central planners do it, whether it's Trump or Biden or Obama or Bush or anybody. Central planning fails. The problem is we don't always see its failure. Like if it's on a grand scale, like in the Soviet Union, you see it. But we don't really see the Fed's failures. Primarily because we don't have a parallel universe in which we don't have a Fed, in which we can see the astounding success. And the fact is that while most economists, I dare say, object usually to central planning, straight out central planning, almost all economists are okay with central planning when it comes to money and the Fed. And therefore, nobody is giving you the counterfactual. Nobody is presenting the counter evidence to what is going on. The damage being done every single day to our lives, every one of our lives, by the central planners at the Federal Reserve. Maybe as much damage as the rest of the government combined in some senses. All right. Stay away from central planners. I don't care if they're Republicans. I don't care if they're Democrats. I don't care what political party they are. Central planning, bad. Don't buy. All right, let's see what we have here in terms of Super Chat questions. We will start with the $20 and above. Of course, you can continue to provide, to support the show through the Super Chat. You can also, thank you, Noel. You can also just provide value, like value for value, like Noel just did, or provide, or add some money into the new studio fund, which will be launched, the studio will be launched in June of this year. Just a quick reminder to like the show before you leave. We've got 75 likes, 130 viewers. Like the show before you leave, please. All right. Do you think one of the reasons that many layman objectivists and people in general focus so much on politics and economics is because of difficulty of objective introspection? Is politics just that bad right now? I mean, politics is particularly bad right now. But I do agree with you that politics is a diversion from the difficult, hard, emotionally challenging work that is needed to make you a better person. You a better person. And that's the sense in which introspection is hard. But it's more than just the introspection, the work that needs to be done to make yourself better, the study you need to engage in to know ideas so that you can improve yourself. So everything about working on ethics, working on philosophy, working on your career, working on your emotions, working on mind-body integration, working on making you a better person, a significantly better person. Making your life a happy life. All of that is indeed harder than watching the news and bitching and complaining. It's just really easy. The issues are easy. The challenges are easy. It's just not that hard. Alan says, Dr. Book, when you have time, read Mark Carney's book, new book, Oh My God, A Socialist Central Banker. I guess one of my points is they were all socialists, really, deep down. Because they're all central planners. And if you believe in central planning of money, why wouldn't you believe in central planning about everything else? So deep down, they're all central planners. Wanda Freeman says, but I like complaining, Your Honor. Yeah, but that's exactly what this philosophy is not about. It's not about what you like. It's about what's good for you. That's an important statement, if I can say so myself. Objectivism is not about what you like. Morality is not about what you like. The objectivist morality, the egoistic, selfish morality of objectivism is not about what you like. It's about what's objectively good for you. And to discover what's objectively good for you requires work. All right, Joe has a $50 question, so he has priority. As a millennial, I would like to hear your thoughts on music and how to improve it for my generation, to help bring them closer to an objective philosophy through music, pop culture. I never hear solutions to this. Thanks for your work. Also, new studio fund. Thanks, Joe. Really appreciate that. Music is the most difficult because music is the least conceptual. Musical has no conceptual message. So what I think people can learn from music that will enhance their lives and move them closer to an objectivist philosophy is a few things. And again, I'm on thin ice and speculating a little bit because music is so difficult and so hard to be objective about. But this is what I think. Music, for example, proper music appreciation can help you extend your attention span. One of the real problems millennials have, and I think a lot of us have, mostly those of us who consume a lot of electronic content, is a very short attention span. Short attention spans are not good for thinking. Thinking, writing, figuring problems out requires, and this includes the objectivist philosophy, requires concentration, working on a problem often for long hours, really thinking something through, devoting a lot of energy to one area and one topic. It requires attention, prolonged focus. I think music can really help with that. But for that, you have to, A, start listening to longer music that requires more focus and concentration. And you have to commit yourself to that focus and concentration. Which means, and I've said this often, like with classical music, it means turning down the lights and trying not to do anything except listen to the music. And yes, your mind will drift, but just like when they tell you in meditation, well, bring your focus back. Bring your mind back. Focus again on. I would say focus again on the music. Put your iPhone in another room. Right? Put the music loud so you're not distracted by anything else. Turn down the lights so you're not distracted by anything else. And try to focus your mind and your emotions and your introspection on the music. What emotions is it evoking in me? What is happening? How am I responding? Don't evaluate it. Just focus. Now, if you can start doing that, and you can sit down and listen to an entire symphony with focus, you will find that your attention span in other parts of your life, in other areas, will expand and will improve. And that's why I think classical music in particular is so valuable. I don't think you can do that with a 3-minute song. I don't think it means anything. It's candy. See, pop music is, pop culture generally, is candy. It's sugar. A little bit is fine. A little bit is nice. Too much of it will rot your teeth, give you diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. And that's exactly what too much pop culture will do to you. Still wearing the headphones. Unbelievable. So part of what millennials have to do is get away from pop culture. Get away from pop music. Get away from, oh, I love this. Wanda Freeman says, it's junk food for the mind. Yes, perfect formulation. They need to get away from the junk food for the mind. And you need to find aesthetic experiences, music in this case, that are meaningful and that require focus, concentration, introspection, and attention span. Right? So that's what I would do. It's not easy. It's not particularly popular. You know, the idea of introducing people to classical music and then having them listen to long periods of time and in a really focused manner. It's not, and it's a rejection of everything that is pop culture. It's a rejection of junk food. All right. Is classism always a bad thing? If you've made something of yourself, is it wrong to look down on those who haven't strived in life the way you have? Well, it depends what you mean by classism. Classism, vis-a-vis, I belong to a particular class and you don't, is a bad thing. Achievism, if you want to call it that, might not be. That is, the idea that I've achieved something and you haven't, that's fine. But class is not always defined by achievement. Class is not always defined by achievement. often people in a particular so-called class, I'm not even sure class is a real term, but in a particular or real concept, people in a particular class for no fault of their own. Because their parents were rich, they're rich. And they're snobs towards people who are not rich. How's that right? Or they got lucky. Or the person who's poor right now actually is an amazing entrepreneur who's just failed after he took 2 companies public, put all his money into a 3rd company, and it blew up on him. Is that a failure? Not in Silicon Valley, that's another success. And in his 4th company, he'll probably succeed again. So you got to be really careful on who you're looking down on. And classism is never right. You don't belong to a class. You belong to you. If you reach the point of achievement and you're proud of those achievements and you look at people around you and say, why don't they achieve as much as I have? That's a legitimate thing to say. But I wouldn't call that classism. And if you say to yourself, I'm so good, I'm only going to hang out with people in my, quote, class, that's absurd. That's collectivist and stupid. You want to hang out with other achievers. But those achievers might be rich. They might be poor right now. They might be a Howard Roark just starting out. They might be an entrepreneur who's at a startup who's eating sandwiches and sleeping in the office. So, now I hate anything to do with class. I think class is a terrible term. It's a Marxist term. You mentioned on the last show that you think many doctors and psychologists today are quacks. Why do you think that is? I don't think many doctors are quacks. I said some doctors. What was the context? I don't remember what the context was. But I remember saying something like, there are a lot of doctors out there pitching things, stuff, snake oil in a sense, who are quacks. And I think they are. There's they do it for the profit. They do it for the attention. They do it for whatever. I don't think it's many. I certainly don't think it's most that do that. I think most don't. Most doctors don't associate themselves with particular products that are questionable. Right? Psychology, I don't know. I'm not an expert, so I'm going to leave that. But psychology, I don't think they're quacks, but I think there's a lot of knowledge they don't have that they pretend to have, because psychology is still, I think, such a young science. And many of them ignore or claim there's no such thing as free will. And I'm not sure how you can be a psychologist and what good you could do without acknowledging that people have free will. Why are all these people out there? Well, I think because of philosophical reasons. They're not trained. Moral reasons. They don't have an ethic, or the ethic they've been taught is an impractical one, like altruism, and therefore they reject it for the sake of pragmatism. I think for the same reasons why we live in a culture that is not very moral, because I think morality, the whole idea of morality, the terminology of morality is completely messed up and screwed up. All right. If you have more specific questions about what I said about Dr. Psychologist, you can ask it again. I guess to some extent, I'm not sure. South Dakota was the only state to not close any businesses, and the only state in its entirety to not have mask mandates. How can I still have hope in America's future? It's hard. It is hard. We need to keep fighting. We need to keep challenging. We need to keep producing, and we need to keep, articulating a case for freedom. We need to continuously make the case for why there shouldn't have been lockdowns anyway. But the positives, what the value of freedom really is and why freedom is important, right? Because that's something people don't do. Okay, Emmanuel writes, my life has improved through Yaron Brook Show. Thank you. The reminder that your mind is your tool for understanding the world, to surround yourself with beautiful art, to be rationally optimistic. Thank you, value for value, support the show, people. Thanks, Emmanuel. Really appreciate that. All right. Let's see. All right, that was South Dakota. And look, the hope, the reason to be positive about the world is that there's still good people out there. Maybe they didn't go out into the street to demonstrate the lockdowns, but there's still good people out there producing and working and appreciate their life and pursuing values and trying to be happy and trying to be and be good. Be good meaning be good to themselves. Right. So Adam writes, I live surrounded by rational, productive, self-actualizing, excellent people from every place in the world, including countries where Ayn Rand's books are readily available. Why are so few of these excellent people objectivists? Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. It's a great question. And I think the answer at the end is that they, have not found the courage. Maybe they don't see the need, but a lot of it is courage, or have not been introduced to enough to the idea that altruism is bad. Altruism is wrong. Because Adam, I think you're talking about, the engineers and the scientists and the kind of the incredibly productive, rational people who live in California and who work in the tech industry and industries similar. And so the problem is primarily not epistemological. They're rational. It's moral. It's ethical. It's about their commitment to altruism. In a sense, to tradition. Because they don't. It's not that they live altruistically. And that's how they can get away with still holding altruism, because if they actually had to live the altruism, they would hate it, they would reject it, they would look for alternatives. But the thing is, in the modern world, you can live a pretty good life. You can live a productive life, a fairly happy life, a fairly rational life, feel a little guilty here and there, do things out of a sense of duty when you shouldn't be doing them, but mostly enjoy yourself and do good stuff and be self-actualizing and still hold altruism and still have those links to particularly people from other parts of the world, links to your traditions, to your people, to your family, to your altruism, wherever its source happens to be. Family in most Asian countries, God in most Western countries, the society, the state in most leftist Western countries. Altruism is and collectivism are very, very difficult to convince people away from. And what you notice is the better people will go, I want both. I want my self-help, self-actualizing. And I still want to feel like I'm moral. i.e., I am an altruist. So the only way it's going to change is we got to go after them. We've got to remind them. We've got to point out to them. We've got to emphasize to them over and over and over and over again all the ways in which their life could be better. All the ways they're being screwed by their altruism and by their collectivism and by their, as a consequence, their statism. And we need to show them the upside of abandoning, of taking up, in a sense, arms against their tradition, their family, their history, and their commitment to altruism. And that is hard for them, and therefore requires us to be loud and to be out there And this is why I want 1,000 intellectuals out there on the, pounding the airwaves, pounding the internet with these ideas without being shy about them. And we have to show them. But no, we also have to tell them because people are smart. I was told. And we have to show them through art and show them through our own lives. So it's tell them and show them and show them and show them and show them in all kinds of ways. That's the only way. I don't know. I don't think there's a shortcut. And for some people, Ayn Rand is enough. For others, it's not. It's just not enough. It's not enough to give them the courage to stand up to the culture, to stand up to the world, to stand up to their own subconsciously held strong beliefs in altruism and collectivism. Would a proper currency lead to constant deflation? Does near zero inflation thus indicate that government is effectively taxing away productivity improvements and causing permanent stagnation? I don't know if a proper currency leads to constant deflation. It's really hard to tell. I don't even know, we're talking about price deflation, whether the whole issue of price inflation and deflation are meaningful in a free market, because prices of computers are basically flat, right? I pay about the same for my Macintosh today as I did 20 years ago. But my Macintosh today can do 1,000,000 times more than what it did 20 years ago. So that's deflation, but how do we capture it? How do we measure it? There's a committee at the Treasury Department or whatever that calculates this, that figures out that part of a price which is the improvement and shows that. But that's not objective. There's no objective measure of that. There's no way to estimate it. So it's not accurate. So some prices are going to go up. Some prices are going to go down because of supply and demand. Some products will improve in quality. Some maybe won't over a certain period of time. I don't know whether you'd see what it means to see constant deflation. What we know is this, that with proper currency, you don't see prolonged periods of inflation, unhealthy inflation, out of whack. You don't see prolonged periods of unhealthy deflation, that is, prices collapsing. You see relatively stable prices with potentially lowering over time, but you definitely see improvement. You see rising standard of living. You see the quality of what they can buy with $1 constantly increasing. That is true. Now, what near zero inflation indicates is, again, very little, because we don't know how to measure inflation. And it is true that the increase in productivity is being taxed. So things should be cheaper and we're paying more. We're paying more so the government can spend more. We're paying more in a hidden tax. Inflation is a hidden tax. It's a tax on our consumption. It's a tax. It's both a consumption tax and a wealth tax. It taxes, every dollar is taxed in a sense by how much it depreciates in value over time. I don't think it's causing permanent stagnation. I think what's causing permanent stagnation is not inflation. It's the very existence of the Fed. Ultimately, in the case, the modern stagnation that we're seeing, because look, the country standard of living, quality of life has grown. We haven't had stagnation. Quality of life, standard of living are going up, have been going up for forever in the United States, with a few blips downwards, but generally forever. The stagnation is more, I think, going to be a feature of the malinvestment that holding interest rates so low and printing money and bailing everybody out is causing. It's the bailouts, the buying up bonds, and keeping interest rates low, not inflation per se, that is going to cause the permanent stagnation. Laser eye surgery is $299 per eye and 3 15-minute appointments. In 2003, it was $1,500 per eye and 2 hours each. It's not paid for by government or by insurance, by the way. It's very little regulated, but it is regulated. Imagine if cancer treatment had advanced that much. I know. Veterinarian care, gone down in price, increased in quality, increase in demand. Because it's not regulated, it's not covered by third-party ridiculous pseudo-insurance, and it's not covered by the government. It's not covered by Medicare, Medicaid. In a free market for vaccines, I argue that the last person to be vaccinated would get it before the first person in the centrally planned response. The look I get says, but the rich guy got it first. Hating the good always. I mean, maybe the rich guy got it first, but maybe the rich guy's parents and grandparents get it first. Maybe the entire, what do you call it? Old age facility, whatever it's called, that his parents live in get it first, because he wants to give it to everybody in the facility, because that's what the rich guy does. Right? Maybe hospitals outbid the rich guy to make sure that their doctors get it first. I'll tell you who certainly doesn't get it first. It's the 91-year-old without rich kids. Because the 91-year-old doesn't actually need it. The 91-year-old can isolate themselves. The 91-year-old is not going to live for that long anyway. So rich people would buy it for other people. Rich companies would buy it for their employees. Rich hospitals would buy it for their doctors and nurses. Nursing homes would buy it for their employees and then their patients, then the people in them. Children would buy it for their parents. Philanthropic organizations would buy it for poor people. I mean, the distribution would be unpredictable because it would be guided by people's values, whatever they happen to be. If we as a society value old people, then we would all pool our money together and buy it for old people. Right? That's what the government's doing in our name. But it's not clear that we do value in and of itself old people. All right, got that. I'm in Los Angeles, which is overrun with homeless. What's the proper solution to this homeless crisis? I mean, the solution is complicated because it's multidimensional. First, you have to stop giving them free homes like they do in Los Angeles, because that just attracts homeless people from all over the country, to come there with the expectation that one day the mayor of Los Angeles will give them a free home. Second, you have to make it economically feasible for developers and contractors to build cheap housing. One of the reasons you get homelessness is because current building codes and regulations, particularly in the big cities, do not make possible the building of cheap housing. The cheapest housing you are allowed to build based on code, how big a room has to be, whether it has to have air conditioning, how many bathrooms per room, all by regulation, defines the minimal property as a middle-class property. So everybody who can't afford that is basically homeless, or owns an old property that didn't have to abide by building codes. You'd also have to have a free market. No minimum wages, where people could get jobs. And you'd have to have a healthier culture that produces fewer mentally ill people. and maybe a better organized charitable institutions that dealt with the mentally ill. And then you'd have to stop giving goodies to homeless people who are not mentally ill. Tell them to get a job. But first, there has to be an economy that produces jobs, an economy that produces housing. Were Americans more explicitly selfish in the 19th century than today? How could that be without Atlas Shrugged? Atlas Shrugged is not necessary in order to be more selfish than you are today. Aristotle was more selfish. His ethics code was more selfish. The Enlightenment was more selfish than Christianity and had a moral code that was more selfish than today. Not as selfish, not as consistently selfish, not as philosophically selfish as Atlas Shrugged, but still better than what exists today. The focus was on pursuit of happiness. The focus was on individualism. The focus was on success and achievement. That comes out of Aristotle, generally the Greeks. That comes out of a culture, the culture of Greece, the culture of the Renaissance, the culture of the Enlightenment. People asserting themselves. So don't think that the only way to be good is objectivism. The only way to be maybe consistently, explicitly, philosophically, with a philosophical justification is through objectivism. But humanity has survived for hundreds of thousands of years without objectivism. There have been very good periods for humanity without objectivism. So some of the ideas within objectivism must be achievable without objectivism. The efficacy of reason, the value of the individual and the pursuit of the individuals. So even if it's not consistent, therefore it's not going to be as good as an objectivist culture, it's still better than the culture we have today. I just turned 43. Is that young? From where I'm sitting, that's young. I'm sure from other people, where other people are sitting, it's not. There's complete subjectivism. If they were so smart and knew what everyone wanted, they would start a company and become millionaires. True. I mean, as it is, it's so hard to tell what some people want as related to one particular product. I mean, part of the genius of people like Steve Jobs is they could figure that out, but they could figure that out with one product, or 10 products, or 20 products, but not with all of reality, all of the economy. The market is signaling me to send you, Ron, some money. Yes, absolutely. A lot of people did not get that signal, though. I don't know what happened. Thank you for all you do, Yuan. Do you have any advice for students who have a problem with procrastinating? Yeah, stop it. And the best way to stop it is, I think, to get in the habit of not doing it. Now, I'm a big procrastinator, so I have been in the past. And one of the best ways for me is schedule time to do the things you need to do. Schedule it. Put it on your calendar. Put a reminder. I'm not going to study just before the exam. I'm going to study 2 days before from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. and I put an alarm on my calendar. And when the alarm goes off, I'm going to do it. Going to do it. Thank you, Frank. I really appreciate that. That'll go towards the oil change for the Yaron Brook Show. Thank you. Right? So, find tools. There's a lot of tools out there. There's a lot of good self-help people out there that help you with lists and prioritizing and with. But the big point is schedule it. Make it a routine, not to procrastinate, in spite of the urge. And remind yourself, voting on one life, every minute counts. Procrastinating is a waste of time. It creates stress. Stress is not good for me. It's not good for me mentally. It's not good for me physiologically. So, anyone shop at Aldi supermarket? Don't know what that is. They have one brand of any stock products. They save money by sacrificing choice. Yes, absolutely. And you can save money, you can save money by sacrificing choice at Costco. You still have choice, but a lot less than a regular supermarket, or at other big box chains. Regarding whether racism is essential to the country's history, don't you think haters will use any excuse to attack America for its greatness? If they weren't exploiting racism, it'd be another Trojan horse. Yes, exactly. But that's why we should be objective about it. We should be. Racism is an important part of this country's history. We fought a bloody, the bloodiest war in our history in order to eradicate slavery. That's not a minor part of America's history. We inflicted the pain of slavery on hundreds of thousands for decades and decades. We had Jim Crow laws. We had a civil rights movement. We're now going through all kinds of racist pains. So, yeah, haters are always going to find an excuse. And the way to get to deal with lies, with hate, with distortions, is with truth. It is what it is. Reality is what it is. America is still the greatest country in all of human history. And at its founding, right, the founding documents, the founding principles, the most moral country in human history, in spite of the fact that there was slavery. Because those principles are what led to its ultimate abolition, not just in America, but all over the world. All right, we're going to end with this. I stopped paying much attention to news and politics. Instead, focused on advancing my career. Big things coming. Thank you for your work. Thank you for giving me that kind of feedback. Hopefully, I was a part of getting you focused on your career. Yeah, you can achieve great things. All of you can. Don't waste your time in places where you have no impact, places that just frustrate, places where you can do very little to change things. Focus on the things you can change. Focus on your life, your values, your happiness. All right, everybody. Thank you. I'll see you tomorrow at noon Eastern Time, 12 o'clock Eastern Time. Not sure what the topic will be. If anybody has a topic that they'd love me to do and are willing to put some money into it, topic sponsorships are $1,000. If you have something tonight, send it to me. Youron@youronbookshow.com. I'm really interested in doing topics sponsored, both because of the money, but also because it makes it easier for me, because you get to choose the topic instead of me. Right? You get to choose the topic instead of me. So, yes, I feel like I'm repeating. It's harder and harder because 4 shows a week. That's a lot of topics. A lot of topics. Oh, Don is on with Harry Binswanger at noon tomorrow. All right, maybe it'll be a different hour, but it'll be tomorrow. There'll be a You're On Book Show tomorrow. I'm not sure exactly what time. I will let you know. Stay tuned. All right, stay tuned. Bye, everybody. Oh, don't forget to like the show before you leave. We got more likes potentially there. There should be more likes. And don't forget to support the show on youronbookshow.com/support. And of course, don't forget to subscribe. Subscribe.